All right, this is my grandpa, Dennis Bell, and he was born in '49, and I'll be interviewing him over when he grew up and he was my age. All right. So, what year was it when you were like 17 years old or teenager growing up?
What year was it? Well, that would have been in in high school years, 64 through 67.
And where were you living at the time?
I was born and went through school in Dodge City, Kansas.
How many siblings did you have, and describe like a little bit what they were like?
I had an older brother, a year older than myself, who was very active in sports, wrestling, and outdoor activities. I had a brother that was 4 years younger. He was very active in motorcycles and go-karts and things like that, horses. I had a younger sister who was 10 years younger, who was spoiled rotten and active in anything she wanted to be.
Describe what your parents were like.
My dad was a blue-collar worker. He after he got out of the Navy when the war ended in 1940, he got out in 1945 and came back and became a carpenter, a finished carpenter, and did that for some years, and then opened his own plumbing business and had that until he passed away.
What about your mom?
My mom was a housekeeper that raised the 4 kids and took care of the books for my father's plumbing company.
So were they like really strict around the house, or?
My mom was very lenient to make up for my dad being so non-lenient.
All right. When you were in high school, did you participate in any clubs or sports?
I was in the drama club. I was in the choir. In high school, I was only in track for 1 year, and I didn't participate in any other sports. It was mainly music.
What were your favorite like school subjects at the time?
Well, I really wasn't thrilled about being in school at that time. I didn't understand and see the necessity and the need for further education. I didn't get it. I didn't have a teacher that turned on my light bulb about anything. I look forward to being out of school.
Do you remember having like a best friend in high school?
I did. I had several. Cleo Reynolds, one of my friends I went all the way through junior high and high school with. Donnie Cecil, I went all the way through grade school and high school, and have since been around quite a bit.
What is your most valued memory from high school?
Oh man, there's so many.
One in particular?
I don't know. Really, I don't know that I can pull one out. There were a lot of things that that are great memories that we shouldn't have done, and I certainly wouldn't want to talk about on tape. But I think probably one of the most fun things that I did and remember in high school was participating in several musicals.
Okay. What made you want to join the Navy, and when did you join?
Well, after high school graduation, I enrolled in Dodge City JUCO, and mid-semester, I realized that wasn't for me. Excuse me, which I think a lot of people should realize that college isn't for everyone, but it's very important to the people that should be there. And I knew it wasn't for me. That was in 1967, 1968 early. The war in Vietnam was going strong, and I had a brother that was in the Navy and had been in about a year, and I just felt that I needed to get out of this town to do something with my life, because I wasn't going to go to school, so that I didn't stay in this town and ruin my life.
From what you can remember, like what was the basic training like, and what steps did you have to go through to be in the Navy?
Well, basic training was, for me, not a big deal, but my dad was such a disciplinarian and such a strong-armed person of raising us, the boys, that for me, boot camp was just a walk in the park. It was, they tell you to do something, you do it. And you do it to the best of your ability and make it right, and everything goes smoothly. But for a lot of kids that were in boot camp that had never been raised with any discipline, it was extremely difficult because they didn't know how to follow direction or an order, and they thought they could buck the system or they could refute the person giving the orders, and for them, it wasn't fun. They literally got beat up on.
Yeah. So like the physical aspect, was that
Well,
tough part? Or?
it wasn't in basic training. It's not if you're halfway fit, and you have to pass a physical exam to get in. But there's marching every day. There's some running every day. At that time, you had to go to class. Part of some days you had to go to the shooting range to learn how to shoot better. Other times you go to the gas chamber to learn how to react in case you got into a gas situation, and then just doing the things that you would normally do, doing your own laundry, going to chow, following directions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at that time it lasted 12 weeks, I believe.
Was that the only training you had to go through?
That was your first step of training. So then after that, and while you're in boot camp, they give you what they call a basic battery of tests that checks your aptitude of what you're best suited for to do in the service. I got selected to be, in Navy terminology, a radio man, which a radio man is on every vessel the Navy has, on every station the Navy has, on every base the Navy has. They're the direct line of communication with other squadrons or other bases or other ships, other submarines, other planes. So that's what they said I was best suited for. And so then at that point, after boot camp, then you go to 3 months of what they call A school, which was to become taught to be a radioman, basic electronics and electricity and Morse code and learning circuitry and how to make receivers and transmitters work properly.
How many years did you serve?
I was in almost 11 years. I was lucky or unlucky enough, depends on how you look at it, lucky enough to be selected in a portion of the communications area of the Navy that was called VLF, which is very low frequency, and worked at only two in the world transmitting facilities that transmitted a megawatt of power, which is 1 million watts that those transmit, and that communication was very guarded in security, that it sent information out to our submarines, locating other submarines, and so it was great duty. It allowed me to spend some great time overseas and have my family overseas.
Where all were you stationed, and what was your favorite place?
I was stationed in San Diego. From there I went to Naval Air Station Patuxent River, Maryland, which is about 60 miles south of Washington, D.C., at a communications station, at a communications area of a Naval Air Station. From there, I went to Hawaii, to NAVCOMSTAY Honolulu, and initially started there at a little outpost from Honolulu up in Wahiawa, which was a communications center, and from there got sent down to a transmitting facility, which is where I got lined up with the VLF sites that I further worked with. After 3.5 years in Honolulu, then we got sent to NAVCOMSTAY Harold E. Holt, Western Australia, which is a very isolated base, which was 850 miles north of Perth, and only had one dirt road in and one dirt road out. So there was no radio or no television. There was, on the base, there was armed services radio, but that wasn't current television or radio. So you either adapted to liking outdoor activities, which my family did, and we did a lot of diving and fishing and hanging out on the beach. From Australia, I came back to San Diego for 6 months of more cryptology type school for the Navy, and from there got stationed at Naval Air Station Whidbey Island, Washington, which is about 60 miles south of the Canadian border, up in Washington on an island. And that's where I got out of the service.
Okay, so when you were around my age, like, what were some things that were like on the news that really stood out? Really historic things.
Well, you know, the number one thing on all news was the Vietnam War. Of all the kids that we were losing, which was, you know, over 50,000 service members got killed over there. And so there was a lot of protest and a lot of people not wanting us to be there, so making large protests in the streets, disliking service members for, you know, they would call us baby killers and all kinds of things, but they didn't want us to be in Vietnam and protested anything that had to do with it. That was the main news.
Mm-hmm. How did you first meet Martha?
That was the semester I was enrolled in JUCO in Dodge City. My friend Cleo Reynolds and I were going up the stairs. By the way, that building was what is now the USD 443 administration building, the old junior college, which is across the street from the library here in town. But we were going to class that morning, and I saw this beautiful woman standing on the steps that had legs to die for, and I told my friend Cleo I was going to marry her. And that's how I met her. I went up and introduced myself.
When did you guys get married and where?
We got married July 6th of 1969 in Copeland, Kansas, in a church that the air conditioner didn't work.
Okay. Did you like notice anything or about the civil rights movement at the time?
Well,
a big deal
yeah,
here?
the civil rights movement was a big deal at the time, and I noticed it not until I went into the service and was in A school, which would have been mid-year of 1968. And on the base in San Diego, there were groups of African Americans that were walking around the base causing problems. And I didn't understand why. I didn't know why. You know, truly coming from Dodge City at that time, in that era, we didn't have racial issues that I was aware of. I certainly didn't have any. We had a few black families, a few Hispanic families that lived here then, but you know, we went to school together, we played ball together, we hung out together. So I didn't know there was a racial issue, but it became evident pretty quick.
So, like at the different places you were stationed, was it evident that there were racial differences everywhere you went?
I only noticed it in San Diego because after that, you learned in the service that a man's color of his skin doesn't matter at all. How the guy treats you and how you treat that guy is all that matters, because, you know, when you're in need of somebody to watch your back, you shouldn't be asking what color is he. You depend on him taking care of you as you're going to take care of him. Color wasn't an issue for me.
Do you remember where you were when the Kennedy assassination happened, and what was your initial reaction?
Well, I was in school, but I wasn't aware of it until I got home from school, and I was pretty young. I don't recall the year right now, but I walked in the house and my mother was just so distraught and weeping and crying, and I didn't know why, and then the television was on, and I got to understand what she was so upset about.
Mm-hmm. Did you watch the first man land on the moon?
Yes, I believe. I know I saw it either right after or during. I'm not sure which.
Do you remember hearing anything about like the Cold War at the time or relations with Russia?
Oh yeah, that was on a lot of the news. The issue with the Russians and the wall and we were in a Cold War and everybody concerned that the other one was going to push the button on the other one to have a nuclear holocaust. But luckily, enough people had their wits about them to not let that happen.
Mm-hmm. And the Watergate scandal, do you remember?
I do. I didn't
about that?
I didn't get it at first. I didn't understand really what happened. It took a few days for me to figure it out because the news just kind of slided whatever I was listening to. But it became obvious that there were people doing crooked things and they shouldn't have, and it certainly became obvious to Nixon in a short time.
Did you ever hear or see anything about Woodstock, or was that a really big deal where you were?
It wasn't with me. I was in the service, and here again, the era that I was in the service were the '60s, were the '70s, were the drug years, were the big deal, and I was so sheltered by being in the service and being afraid to even go near any drugs because you lose your security clearance, therefore you lose your job. But we heard all about Woodstock and certainly the music. We all were aware of the musics, and it was a big deal to the people that were there.
So at the time, like, what was the type of music that you listened to or liked to listen to?
Oh, I liked a lot of the rock. I liked Janis Joplin. I liked the Doors. I liked the heavier stuff.
And those were like the famous artists at the time, the big time.
And the Beatles, of course.
Mm-hmm. Was there any like special type of dancing that was really popular?
Yeah. The twist, the mashed potato. Some of us danced, but we didn't know what they were called.
What were some of your favorite TV shows and movies that were on at the time?
Oh, The Lone Ranger. Any Western show back then. But in my younger years, of course, all we had was black and white television. So, and after I got out, I came back and color was prevalent and remotes and things like that, then everything was my favorite. And still is.
Yeah. All right, so to sum it all up, like, was there one particular thing that just about the 60s that you really enjoyed the most, or about your teenage years? Or
I think truly I enjoyed the travel in my early Navy years because I was able to have Martha with me, and my oldest son Shane was born in Hawaii, and my youngest son Trevor was born in Australia. So I got to see a lot of the world with them that I probably would have never seen.
all right, thank you.
You're welcome.